Professor Atia Adam holds PhDs in English and Education from the Universities of Cambridge and Oxford, respectively. She became an official Cambridge primary teacher trainer and has successfully completed teacher training workshops at various schools locally and internationally. In 2019, she established the ARC Academy and now runs the ARC Academy's International Primary Training Workshop. Atia, you wanted to plow your knowledge of education back into the community, and you aim to help and equip home education parents with the skills to assist their children with completing the international curriculum. Now, how does the international curriculum differ from the CAPS curriculum, and why do many families choose this option?
Okay, thank you so much, Anel, for the opportunity to explain certain concepts and for this interview. One of the main reasons, or one of the differences, or there are many differences, especially between the CAPS and the international curriculum. So let me first explain the CAPS curriculum, give you my opinion on that, and then I'll draw a parallel to the international curriculum and answer your question as to why many parents or families choose this option. What I have found over the years is that the CAPS curriculum is way too content heavy. There's just too much information for the teachers to get through. There's also no time for consolidation. And when do they actually have time to revise? There's a jump from the one topic to the next topic. And in my opinion, this just creates such a lot of anxiety and stress on the teachers as well as on the children, because that stress filters down onto the children as well. And in that way, the teachers don't really have the time available to assist the children, especially the children that have learning barriers and those children that need a little bit more help. The CAPS curriculum is also way too rigid. There's such a set schedule that the teachers have to follow, and I feel that there's no time for consolidation whatsoever. There's also the children are being over-assessed. They are assessed from grade 1 already. Why? What is the reason for that? Why do I have to put such a lot of pressure on these little individuals? School is there to be enjoyed, education is there to be enjoyed, and when they have to be over-assessed, then what's the purpose for that? And the most important thing is the CAPS curriculum, in my opinion, do not produce thinkers. I feel that the children are taught not to think, and instead they're producing little robots that regurgitate that information, and that's all that they need to do. Contrary to this, we find the international curriculum, where it is more learner-centered. And in this way, we check to see exactly where the children is or where the children are in their learning process. The concepts that are being taught are manifested over time, and this approach leaves room for that solidifying of the concepts, irrespective of what stage or phase you are targeting. There are very little structured assessments to be done, especially in the primary phase, and this is so important. We'll talk about the assessments later on, but when we look at the assessments are not quantified. They're there to gauge the child's understanding, and that is important. It's not the knowledge that the child has acquired, but the understanding and the application of that knowledge into certain skills. And once we have that transfer of the knowledge into the unfamiliar context, then learning has actually happened. Now, the one that I like the most is the international curriculum creates free thinkers. The children are asked their opinion in a risk-free environment. And it's not a case of children are being seen and not heard. They are definitely heard. And the noisier, the better, actually, because they're constantly coming up with new ideas. We manifest higher order and critical thinking skills. And these two skills are so important because it helps the children to think and not just to memorize. It improves their cognitive ability, and this critical thinking helps the children, especially when it comes to the comprehension abilities. So when I draw the parallel between the two, I think that is the main reason why parents choose to do the international curriculum, because it just allows them that flexibility. I label the international curriculum the unstructured structure. So yes, you do have that structure, but you also have the unstructured way in which to teach your children and still tick the boxes at the end of the day.
I quite like how you call it the unstructured structure. Because it just focuses on the child-centered method of education. Now, what aspects of the curriculum do parents struggle with the most, and what advice do you give them?
Over the last year or so, what I've picked up is that parents struggle the most with writing, asking themselves the question, how do I get my child to write? And I'm not talking about writing sentences, I'm talking about those text features. There's an entire process involved when it comes to writing. The one thing that needs to be understood is that you cannot teach writing in abstract. Many a times, parents and teachers do exactly the same thing. They would say, write a review on a book you've just read. But if the child has not seen an example of a review, how are they able to do that? The other misconception that children or that people make is the creative writing aspect. What constitutes creative writing? Because if you look at creative writing, how can we gauge and how can we judge each other's creativity? So when it comes to the writing, every piece of writing has got a specific text feature. And you link your writing up to the reading comprehension that you have to do in order for the child to analyze that particular text feature. They need to be taught what that reading comprehension is all about, looking at the gist of the story, etc. And in that way, they understand the sample of the reading comprehension and therefore can then do their actual writing. Interesting research was done by a guy by the name of Pi Corbett, who's he's a mastermind when it comes to writing. He's an English educational trainer, writer, author. He authored probably more than 200 books, and he developed an approach called the talk for writing approach. And basically, he says the first part of writing is to actually talk for your writing. And he has this whole talk for writing approach that enables children to read and write independently for a variety of audiences and purposes throughout or across the various subjects. And a key feature of this is that children need to internalize the language structures needed to write through talking about the text as well as then doing the reading comprehension. So when they're doing their writing, they don't do the writing from nothing. They do the writing from their reading comprehension as a sample, so they know the sequence of the writing. After they've analyzed it, they will know what grammar to use, what vocabulary to use, etc. And you're giving them safety nets or a built-in cushion, in other words. So now they have that confidence in order to do their writing.
I must say, I share those parents' concerns or struggles because it sometimes feels like you are jumping into the deep end of a pool. You have no idea where to start with writing. Solid advice. How expensive is following this approach?
Well, it depends on you and it depends on your financial situation, but it can be as cheap or as expensive as what you would like it to be. Some families purchase the endorsed course books and they teach with that. My advice always is if you're purchasing the endorsed course books, make sure that you know which ones you are purchasing. Make sure that you know what levels you are purchasing, because the one thing you don't want to do is fall into that bottomless pit of financial situation where you buy the incorrect books or you purchase too much and you don't know what to do with it. So it can be as cheap or as inexpensive as what you want it to be. Parents go with service providers. They do it on their own. They use an eclectic approach. So there's no real hard and fast rule to say, look, it is cheap or it is expensive. I think at the end of the day, it depends on the families and their financial situation. And yeah, it can be very expensive or it can be relatively inexpensive.
I think another determining factor would be your end goal in terms of would you like to write a matric qualification, and because I think most of the cost lies in that final exam.
Absolutely. And that is what you need to save up for. Those exams can run into the thousands, literally. So,
Yeah. Now, Atia, you also have qualifications in how can assessment support learning and a learning-oriented approach. Now, how do you apply this knowledge in your workshops?
Well, it could basically be my naivety, but I feel that there is this misunderstanding with what assessments are. We get different types of assessments. We get what is called the formative assessments, where we can determine what comes next. And we get what is called the summative assessments, which is a sort of a judgment with what has gone before. Now you have to assess. There's no getting around it, right? We have to assess, because how else will we know whether the concepts have been understood and solidified? what I do on the workshops is I have an entire session on how we conduct these different types of assessments, but not in a very structured way. Looking at interaction, you're asking your child a question, the child responding accordingly. That's a form of an assessment. Observing the child's learning, observing the way they're reacting towards a specific task, that's a form of assessment. And then the child assessing themselves. And this is so important because self-assessment forms an integral part of the entire assessment process. The child can judge for him or herself, this is what I know and this is what I still need to learn. So in other words, we measure, or the child measures their own strengths and their own weaknesses according to their understanding of the concepts that you have taught him or her.
Self-assessment is actually good that you mention it, because I was just realizing as you mentioned it, that it's a skill that you need as an adult, because you don't always have someone looking over your shoulder, making sure that you know the work you need to do and how to do it. So as an adult, you are constantly self-assessing, and if you didn't learn that skill as a young one, it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, and I mean, exactly. And you know what? Through the self-assessment, the children take responsibility for their own learning. And that is ultimately what we want. By them taking that responsibility, we're teaching them the independence of, these are my shortcomings, but these are my strengths. So how can I take whatever I've learned and strengthen my weaknesses in a way, and challenge myself in order to strengthen the strengths that the child has? So yeah, definitely, I'm all for self-assessment and that responsibility of independent learning.
Yeah, another thing I realized with my son is that sometimes it takes a while for him to grasp a concept, and I have to be patient, especially when teaching him, that to be mindful that I am not assessing him, I am teaching him. And then, one day it just all clicks.
Exactly. And it's when you least expect it. You know, the wonder about children is when you see them playing with their friends or talking to their stuffed toys or whatever it is, you can actually see the conversation that you've had in the classroom or in that setting. You see that happening and the light goes on. As I said, when you least expect it, that's when learning actually has happened.
Yeah. Atia, if parents would want to contact you or to learn more about ARC Academy, how can they get hold of you?
They're more than welcome to email us. Can I share my email details
Yes.
with you? Yeah, okay. It's Atia, ATIA, .arcacademy, one word, @gmail.com.
Atia, thank you very much. I really enjoyed this conversation.
It's a great pleasure.